Thank you. Good evening. I want to call the special board meeting January the 9th to order. Ms. Barella, will you take the roll?
Chair French,
Here,
Vice Chair Crawford,
excused.
Member Jackson, Member
Excused.
Luce,
Here.
Member Nixon,
Here.
Member Rayner,
Here.
Member Wartell.
Here.
Thank you. Chair French, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And with that, is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, Ms. Barella, will you take the roll?
Chair French,
Yes.
Member Luce.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Nixon,
Yes.
Member Rayner,
Yes.
Member Wartell.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. And on the next item, it's review and approval from the minutes from December the 8th, 2022 and December the 12th, 2022. I did read them and they appear to be accurate. So with that, could I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Barella, will you take the roll?
Chair French,
Yes.
Member Luce,
Yes.
Member Nixon,
Yes.
Member Rayner,
Yes.
Member Wartell.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. With that, were there any public comments? I did check my email and there were none sent to the board. And we did get an email, Ms. Barella, right, that there were no public comments sent to the agency?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. No, no discussion. So we'll go on to item 6, discussion and updates on the possible amendments for the ordinance. And I guess first I want to do is ask, and I'll ask each member and staff. Member Wartell, were you aware of these amendments?
Not before they were published by the council.
Member Nixon?
No.
Member Luce? No. Member Rayner?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so for the record, why don't you go over the ordinance that you're talking about? I see the number on it, but
Okay, I'm sorry. So did you want me to read the agenda item? Is that what you're saying, Eric?
no, the yeah, what is said there's changes to the ordinance. We got the ordinance. What are the proposed changes that you're talking about? And this is just for the record because we are on GovTV.
Well, there are quite a few changes to the ordinance. It's quite lengthy, all the changes. But what I posted on the agenda is that the board will be abolished and restructured. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's, like I said, if we have to have another meeting to go over every single change in our input and that sort of thing, but this meeting was more to discuss that, it pretty much, it abolishes the ordinance, abolishes the current board, and I believe it goes to called advisory committee.
And I apologize, Patty. I didn't mean to go over every ordinance or every piece of ordinance. What I meant was just a general synopsis, like you just gave, so that we know the topic for which we're talking. So one thing to say is just ordinance is going to change, but you brought it into you put perspective on it when you actually, in context on it when you basically gave that synopsis. So thank you.
And Chair French, it reestablishes a 5-member board, if I remember it correctly.
A 5-member committee. Yes.
Committee, excuse me.
Advisory committee.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it does. So I've asked the board, let me see who else is on this call. The DOJ, Asia Brooks. Ms. Brooks, were you aware of these amendments?
No.
Then I'll ask our monitor, Mr. Rickman, were you aware of these amendments before they were published?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, then I'm going to ask Ms. Barella, were you aware of these amendments before they were published?
No, Chair French, I was not aware.
Where did Katrina, I don't want to leave out anybody. Katrina, I'm sorry, your video went off. Were you aware of any of these changes?
No, I wasn't, Chair French.
Okay, I just wanted, I just wanted to know if anybody else, and I hope I didn't leave any other person out that might have had knowledge. Okay.
Ms. Gooch.
And Miss Gooch, were you aware?
Thank you, Chair French and Member Rayner. No, I was not. And to help Member Nixon, just to frame for the public watching at home, it's specifically called Council Bill number 02267. And it was listed in the President's minutes last, I believe, Friday. And that is supposed to be heard by City Council on the 18th, just for those watching at home. So to be clear, no, I was not aware of the changes, but also to help everyone know what we're talking about. And these changes were sponsored by Councilors Bassan, Benton, Davis, and Grout.
Okay, so so I guess what I'm saying is that staff didn't know, board didn't know, DOJ didn't know, and our monitor didn't know.
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
If folks didn't know, now my understanding is that you are, as a chair, whenever there is board business to be discussed at meetings, you are supposed to be there. You should be in attendance, or a member of the board that's appointed to do so should be in attendance. Were you made aware that this discussion was going to be happening with City Council? Did it happen in a meeting? Were you supposed to be there at that point, Patty?
I found out when they were published. And as far as was I supposed to be there, I'm going to have to refer to our Councilor Gooch, because she has more of a history than I do. And so this is the first time that the monitor has been here, I believe, when I was chairing. I'm not sure, but I'll leave that historical data to Ms. Gooch, because I just don't know.
Chair French, Member Nixon, I don't know what has gone on regarding these amendments, who was meeting with whom, how that happened, but generally there has been a very comprehensive process when ordinance amendments have happened, whereby it's referred to subcommittees, there's working groups, study sessions, and in those instances, the chair and the board is aware, has appointed members, subcommittees, and done thorough vetting and robust discussion. You have other amici groups that were involved and like to be involved, traditionally were involved. But here, I'm sorry, Member Nixon, I can't opine as to when meetings happened or who was at them. I was at none, nor was Chair French.
Understood. Thank you for that clarity.
Okay.
So when we're talking about these amendment changes, when I look at this, and you know, anyone with the expertise can chime in on this. This is a recommendation to abolish the board, or is this something that has been enacted or will be enacted?
Councilor Gooch?
Thank you, Chair French, Member Nixon. It is something that is being proposed to be enacted. It has not yet been enacted, but it is set to be heard at the City Council meeting on January 18th.
Okay.
The reason I ask that question is because, you know, I don't put a whole lot of stock in proposals until those proposals are enacted upon and then moved into motion and voted upon and then of course put into place. I don't know that this is the first effort in some capacity to make some sort of drastic change or adjustment to the board by City Council. So I'm not surprised either. You know, given the history of this board and the history of the agency and the mission of the board and the agency, it kind of doesn't surprise me per se, because I think that there are certain things that are being put to light on this board and what we're trying to do as a board where the effectiveness of that board is put in question. Do I agree with it? Absolutely not. I think it's a farce, but I think that it also and just in my opinion, the suggestion of abolishing the board is pretty much an insult to not just to the monitor, but to the Department of Justice as well, because with their sanction, with their sponsor, they have put the board in place. So it's one thing to have a discord with members of the board, perhaps, or some of the decisions that the board has made, which I've commended this board on. I've served for about almost 3 years now. Will be in March, and I can honestly tell you that this board I'm pretty impressed with, because not only the diversity and thought and opinion and things that come about, but also in some of the work that we've been able to do and some of the things that we've been able to bring to light and try to make change on. Now, as this goes down, I'm curious, and perhaps Councilperson Gooch could kind of fill us in on this, but what are the next steps? If this is going to be proposed, which entity in this foursome is authorized to make a judgment on that, or make that change come into reality?
Chair French, Member Nixon, City Council. City Council is the author of the enabling ordinance and has the authority to make changes. Now, whether or not the authority should be exercised in this manner or in compliance with the terms of the CASA, which is the overarching guiding court order that applies in this instance, that's a different question, but amending the ordinance is within the purview of City Council, just in the nuts and bolts process. Whether or not it's CASA compliant is a different inquiry.
Okay.
I have a quick question. Sorry. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. I'll let you.
No, you're good. You're good.
So my question then is, because I have been confused about this for kind of my entirety on the board, which is, if the CASA is the overarching agreement, I understand that City Council can do whatever it is that they want within city ordinances. I get that part. But if, like what you're saying, who makes the determination on whether or not this restructuring is CASA compliant, and what is the end result of that? If we come back and they say this is not CASA, one, who would make that determination? And two, what's the repercussions of being out of compliance with the CASA? Because as far as I've seen, there doesn't seem to be really any consequences for not following the CASA. And I'm not just talking about the board. I'm just saying anything in the CASA seems like it's all suggestions as opposed to requirements.
Chair French, Member Rayner, the CASA is a court order, and if someone is in violation of the court order, they are subject to contempt of court. You are correct that historically that kind of hammer has not been used. There's been a lot more interaction with Department of Justice and the city to not get to that point. But at the end of the day, it is a court order that must be complied with. Who decides and when they decide? Very good questions. I believe Department of Justice would be who decides. I also believe the monitor would be who decides. Unfortunately, the monitor looks during monitor periods about compliance. It's kind of retroactive, reactive, if you will. Department of Justice, in many regards, is more proactive, but on this, I'm unclear what their thoughts are or position at this point. But I will say that if it is found to be non-compliant, that's something that the court would deal with. And at that point, however, if the board is gone and if independent counsel is gone, there's no one left to speak for the groups that would be affected by the non-compliance.
Let me just clarify one issue. Could this ordinance be voted into existence on the 18th?
Chair French, Member Wartell, my understanding is that yes, it could, and that is the intent as per the president's minutes, at least when they were published. I have not spoken with anyone at City Council or City Legal that has said it will be delayed. but things change, and maybe there's a way for constituents and others to reach out to counselors to ask questions and ask why, and why is it not being vetted? Why is it not going to subcommittees? Why are there not any working groups? Why? What is the plan? Lots of questions more than answers, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Sorry. So I guess I'm gonna first see if there's anybody from the agency that would like to make comments before I call on the board on how, what they feel about these changes, et cetera. So is anybody from the agency that would like to speak out? Okay, it doesn't appear not. So let's go back. We haven't heard from Member Luce.
This is so early on in my engagement with the board. You know, I've kind of been getting a feel for things and kind of seeing where things are. I think I don't know. Based on what I know at this point, I had kind of the same questions as Member Rayner, just in that if CASA, you know, is the overriding direction, then how does this decision play into that? But I don't have any. I have more questions and answers, I think, just like everybody else.
Okay. Well, I ask the agency, I'll hear from the board, and then I'll ask for a public comment if there is any. So I'm going to go back to you, Member Nixon, and I would like for you, and you may have already given, but I would like for you to actually tell us your thoughts on this new amendment. And I know you haven't read the whole thing, none of us have. Just currently, what are your thoughts on it?
So I just want to clarify one more piece of this. When we talk about the changes going from a board to a committee, what has the city council given the reason to anyone as to why they want to abolish this board and create a committee?
I'll leave that to Councilor Gooch. Like I said, the DOJ, you heard the DOJ, the monitor, the board, the agency was not aware of these amendments. So I will have to refer to our counselor.
Thank you, Chair French. Member Nixon, I have no idea what the basis is for any of these changes. I mean, I could guess on a few, like the honorarium and whatnot, but I don't know. All I have is 02267. I haven't spoken with anyone. I don't have any commentary about why the changes are being proposed in the manner that they are, which is kind of what subcommittee meetings with city council and work groups do, is they allow the vetting and the dialogue and the discussion and the why questions to be answered in a less formal setting, where hopefully at the end you get a better product that works better for the community.
Excuse me, Chair French.
Yes.
Member Nixon. We may be a little bit focused on the wrong words. The real change is from the word oversight board to advisory committee.
Mm-hmm.
Oversight to advisory. Very different roles.
Right. And great point, Mike, because that's where I'm trying to see what the equivalence is, and I don't see any in the two, going from a board to a committee, oversight board to a committee.
And the other issue, just historical, kind of historical issue, is that the oversight board for the Metropolitan Detention Center was just changed by the county to an advisory committee. Mm-hmm. And it's not clear what kinds of authorities. No, I think it's very clear that there is a much diminished authority of an advisory committee as compared to an oversight board.
But I think that in all fairness, that's the intent.
I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't argue.
I think that, I'm reading this book on the economic assassins and what they would do when they went to different countries and did different things. And it was kind of very colorful, very interesting. But I think that this is an attempt to bring this entity that we're calling a board, perhaps changing into a committee, under the guise of APD, of city council, to basically conform to a, to this whole dynamic that we're trying to call oversight, and pull it under, in my opinion, APD, because we're so connected to not having power, but to the chief of police, to where I think that they're looking for more amicable personnel on the board, amicable to what they want. Don't make any waves, don't make any changes, don't make any pushes, kind of sit there and basically do your volunteer work on this board, be a yes board, and then do whatever the board should do in order to support one entity or the other. Whereas in my opinion, in serving as long as I have, this is the first board that we've had, in my opinion, that is independent of thought. Mike's thought is independent of Patty's. Patty's thought is independent of Rashad's. My thought is independent of everyone. So what we have here is what I would consider a real board. Now, I'm just basing that on my volunteer work on this board over the past 3 years. So the more effective a board comes in asking questions and pushing back and voicing concerns and doing things to certain entities, the more that board is not going to conform, if you will. It's not going to be indoctrinated like CIS, Civilian Police Academy, and so on and so forth, where you're being indoctrinated into certain aspects of policing here in APD. Now, one of the things that I've learned, especially after this revelation, is that when we talked about constitutional policing and so on and so forth, when I went back and looked at the findings on cases, when I looked back at the ordinances and I looked at the policies, it's all constitutional policing. Because what it does is it says, look, and you've seen it on the findings letters where they say, yeah, you violated. Yeah, it looks like this police officer did have this misconduct, but it didn't violate any policies. So if you have policies where they can't be violated by behavior that is found to have happened, then that leaves a whole big area for misconduct to happen to the public. Is that a concern of mine? Absolutely. That's been since day one. Is that concerns that'll happen? That's just one. But there may be other members that are pointing out things, that are looking out things, and these are uncomfortable conversations to have, but they're necessary in order to keep the public safe. They're necessary for transparency. Well, there's some things that are airing like dirty laundry that maybe people don't necessarily want to see. I don't see it as dirty laundry. I just see it as an opportunity. And so there may be some differences. I see some attorneys got their hand up. So.
Yes, thank you. Or Chair French, do you mind if I just clarify one point? Okay, I just said that in 067, at least as I'm reviewing it, it does not change the board to a committee. It changes from the Civilian Police Oversight Agency Board to the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board, but it's still throughout the draft is referenced as a board. So I just wanted to make that clarification that it's not an advisory committee.
Which in fact was the point that I was making, Lauren.
Okay, yes, because
oversight to advisory.
No, the word oversight is still there. It's just, it changed it from agency to advisory. It's still the Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board. So,
well, then I'm confused by
it's on page 29 of
the verbiage. Thank you.
Draft ordinance.
But it still says advisory, which that was not there before, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I think that's our point. And I think that's the point they were trying to make, that it's no longer, put advisory, and I think that's what the point you were making, right? Okay, go ahead, Member Nixon. Thank you for that clarification. Go ahead, Member Nixon.
What I was going to say is it really depends on what's going to happen next. So if the board is abolished, okay, and you then have it where the members of the board now have to apply to this board, which we know the difficulties the city council has had in getting members to the board and approving certain applications, so on and so forth, then it seems to me like that may have been the overall effort, which is why the expedition of this process and the lack of transparency on this process by city council is so apparent. I don't see any other motive behind this unless somebody can clarify, because in speaking on this, and I like speaking on camera and so that we have it recorded, I would love to hear another perspective, especially coming from city council, as to what their motive is and what their intent is, as far as making these kind of changes, whether it's something as seemingly benign as going from advisory to board, so on and so forth. It seems to me like there has been a disruption in the intention of what Department of Justice intended when it came to a board versus what the other entities, whether it be city council, APD, the union, etc.'s idea of what a board was. I've always felt like I was kind of the odd man out on the board, because I also felt like there were questions that I'd answer or ask and have concerns about that may not have necessarily been popular. Do I care as a tax-paying citizen of Albuquerque? Not really. The intention of a board member is to take their expertise and take their membership in this community and apply it on this board in order to exact changes that make the community safer, that make the public safer. And so I'm just trying to understand. I don't know where something has been so egregious on all the time the tenure that I've had on this board to where it warrants a change at this point. I just don't see it, unless, like I said, they're just trying to get rid of members.
I'd have a question.
Member Rashad Rayner, go ahead.
To Ms. Keefe, because you didn't ask her if she had any insight into these changes. We're kind of at a loss, and we're just having to speculate as to what this is all about. It seems to be very fast. It seems to be not in the typical fashion. Is there anything that you can, any insight that you can provide to this?
Chair French, Member Rayner, unfortunately, I really cannot answer that question. I really wish City Council were here, because I think they're the only ones who can speak to it. The City Council is my client, and I can't reveal my communications with my client.
Understood. Understood.
Member Rayner, go ahead. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so when I joined this board, and I haven't been on the board for very long, it was to represent the citizens of Albuquerque. It wasn't to get into a political game or anything like that. That's not my intent or issue. It's not my thing, right? I vote, I pay attention to the issues, but that's about it. I just wanted to be a part of a solution. And since I've been on this board, I have seen things that really bother me to my core. I would say that I don't know who's the person or the organizations that are pulling the strings that are getting what I think they want out of this. But what I've seen is, if I were looking to have a very weak oversight component to this, this is exactly how I would do it. In that the agency and the board seem to be unable to get on the same page. It seems like, accusations are being thrown back and forth. The agency is saying things, the board is saying things, and it feels to me like If I were APD, this is exactly how I would want it. I'm not saying that that's what they're doing, but I look at the agency, they haven't had a policy. I look at the executive director. The executive director doesn't have a staff. They have investigators, but where's the policy analyst? Where's the data analyst? Where's the assistant to the executive director? Where's the assistant to the board? Where are all the people that are needed to run an efficient and effective agency so that the board can actually do their job, which is to do oversight, which isn't even of the agency, really. It's the oversight of the police department. But through the agency, we should be working together. And we have been sidelined, both the agency and the board. And I don't understand how this can happen like this, and the Department of Justice not feel some sort of way about that, our monitor not feel some sort of way about that, and our citizens not be upset that this is happening so fast and so with lack of transparency. I'm really disheartened by all of this. I really thought that this was something that we were going to come together. I expected there to be issues and contention, but to just wipe away the board, to just do away with them because over personality issues, or, well, I'm guessing at this point, right? We don't even know. So that says what that tells us what the city council thinks of the agency and the board, because they should be operating together and they should be treated the same and treated as one organization. And so it's very much, I'm just really disappointed. I was reading just the other day that I believe the city of Albuquerque entered into this agreement back in 2014. And 2015 through 2021, Albuquerque has stayed at the #2 spot for fatal police shootings. Has not moved, hasn't dropped, stayed right there at #2. I mean, Chicago's below us. New York City's below us. The only city that's above us is Las Vegas. LA, I mean, and for the board, excuse me, the city council to think that the problem is the board says everything that we need to know about what they think of not just the board, but the citizens. I don't, without any other discussion with the city council, you know, like I've said, I've been on this board, about 6 months or so. Not once has a city councilor come to one of our meetings. I haven't heard from them, no communications in any way, shape, or form. The police union doesn't show up. I mean, it's very disheartening. When we met with the monitor, is it Dr. Rickman or Mr.? I'm not sure. I don't want to.
I think it's Dr.
Rickman. When we met with him, I showed up early, and a representative from the community outreach was talking about all the proposals that they put forth to APD and how he guesstimated about 90% had been rejected. And the ones that were accepted, he had the feeling that they were already going to be accepted. And instead of putting the pressure on APD, we are, one, in such an ineffective, we've been relegated to the sidelines, and now that's not enough. Right now we have to be completely toothless. And so it's like I said, it's disheartening. I don't know, I don't understand how you can represent a city that has an issue. And I want to be clear, the shootings affect the citizens and the police. If you're a police officer and you go on to the job and you shoot someone, kill someone, whether self-defense, you can be completely justified. Your life is forever changed, right? I want that officer to not have ever been in that position. If there's something we can do policy-wise to help that officer not be in that situation, I want to do that. I also want that person who no longer is with us to have had every opportunity to get his day in court or her day in court. And I'm just really surprised by the indifference and now the actual I don't even know what you call it, but like, this is just a surprise. And I'm surprised that the Office of the Monitor and the DOJ seem to be, well, I won't speak for them, but the whole process from top to bottom just has me disheartened as a citizen of Albuquerque, because that's who I represent, is the citizens of Albuquerque. And I think they deserve better than this.
Thank you. And I might tell you that I don't know if there's been an amendment, but I will tell you that the community outreach position was eliminated in this amendment. So just since you know. Member Warchell?
Well, I think both Member Nixon and Member Rod have spoken eloquently to their feelings, and I agree with virtually all of what they said. My greatest concern revolves around the lack of transparency and the lack of consultation and the lack of interaction with the board over major changes that will occur to the board and what we considered an important mission. This board has been in intense agreement on virtually everything we've done. You can't find a vote that wasn't unanimous. So there haven't been the kinds of historical problems with the board that have existed in the past. So I'm troubled by changes that are occurring to a functioning board. The second issue is that both the monitor and the Department of Justice have said they weren't consulted. Now, I would have thought that changes of such magnitude as these would be based on past practice, on expert input, on strong bases for such changes. And it looks like the people who are most knowledgeable, because the board, the city council members certainly haven't had the training that we've had and are not part of the Department of Justice, so they haven't had the background that the Department of Justice people have. And similarly for the monitor has had massive background and interaction with NACOL. They haven't been consulted either. So how can changes like this, of this magnitude, be proposed with so little input? It would be like me discussing the texture of the dark side of the moon, which I have never seen. So that's just my set of feelings about it.
You're muted, Chair French.
Okay, I just had one for Ms. Keith that I think goes along with what Rashad asked you. I just have a question. So you said city council is your client, correct? So is the CPOA your client?
No, because the CPOA has independent counsel.
Okay, so I just wonder, so if you had discussion with anybody, and they've already said they didn't know about these amendments, but if you had a discussion with them, you would have been able to tell us, correct? Because they're not your client.
Yes. I mean, and I have had discussions with members of the CPOA, but not in regard to the current proposed ordinance.
Okay. I'm sorry, Member Luke, did you have your hand up?
I did. I said before, I don't have the history, the background, all of the things that some of you guys have referred to. But in terms of just perspective, I actually read this very differently when it was delivered last week. And then as I've reviewed it a couple of times, and then I was just looking at it again, because to me, as I read this, it didn't have the intention of abolishing the board. It changed the name. It added that advisory component to the name of the board. It reduced the number of members from 7 to 5. But predominantly what this really did was restructure what the agency looks like. But to me, it didn't read as if the board was they were looking to abolish the board or remove it or get rid of it or anything like that. So I'm just wondering maybe if we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Well, I'm sorry. I think it's something in there that says this board will be abolished within 5 days of the ordinance being passed. And then if you want to reapply for the board, for the advisory, what did she say it was? I don't want to get it wrong, Lauren. Advisory
Civilian Police Oversight Advisory Board.
Advisory board. I don't want to get that right. So we're going from, so it does say that we would be abolished within 5 days and you can reapply.
Okay.
Okay.
I see this paragraph. I'm going to that. Thank you for that.
Sure. So
Just one bit of perspective.
Sure. Member Wartell, go ahead.
For Member Luce, it's reducing it from a 9-member to a 5-member board. And the amount of work that, when I got on the board, there were only 4 members. Or there were 4 members very quickly after I got on the board. And the amount of work that those 4 members had to do was massive. The amount of work that's assigned to this board almost requires a 9-member board. You need to be able to distribute the amount of work that's done. And I think that's another set of issues that need to be grappled with. But I understand your perspective. What you said is very reasonable.
Thank you. But yeah, so I got your chat, Ms. Luce, Member Luce. Yeah, so it does abolish. Well, let me just say that I agree with everyone on everything that has been said. And, you know, Member Nixon, I just want to say that I agree too that we have a great board. And I also want to say that Member Jackson called me this evening and he had a family emergency that he couldn't attend, but he wanted me to voice his opinion that he did not agree with these amendments or abolishing the board. But I just want to say that I think that we've worked very hard. I think that we have a great board. We have Member Jackson, who is an outstanding citizen, owns Wink Academy. We have Member Rayner, who is an engineer at Sandia. We have Member Wartell, who's been a chancellor, and for God's sake, he has his own Wikipedia page. I just want to say that. We have Member Nixon, who also is a database person and works for a government entity. We have Member Crawford, who is excellent on the computer. And so I just want to say we now have Member Luce, who was a employee of CYFD for many years, and my hat's off to you for doing that type of work, and now is in mediation. And as Member Wartell said, we have never had a vote that really wasn't unanimous. And have we made some hard decisions? Yes. Have we looked at the citizens' point of view and came back and said, you know, maybe we need to relook at that, you know? But I do think that we have worked hard. And I think that, you know, I don't have my glasses on, but I believe that the last IMR, it was positive. Not our current monitor, because he's new. I think he's only met with the board one time, but Gia Quinto has been our monitor for many years, as far as I know. I don't know how many. And I will say that what he wrote was positive. And I'm just going to read just a little bit. He said, we wrote the IMR 16 with a note of optimism. And that is because we feel that the board members are hardworking, they're diligent. The board members who are there now realize the time requirements, the enormous challenge of being a board member, the responsibilities, and the training requirements. And he goes on to say, we are also optimistic because it appears that they're finally getting their training issues behind them with the diligent work of their council. They proposed new trainings, they revamped it, they are moving in the right direction. So even if they do abolish us, I just want the current board members to say, if you weren't at the hearing last time, there were other things said too. But if you weren't at the hearing last time, our Dan Giaquinto, who had been our monitor for years, there were other things said, but it was with a positive note. And Ms. Gooch, you were at that hearing also, correct?
Yep, Chair French and members of the board, yes, I was in attendance at the hearing and I echo what Chair French has said. There's always room for improvement, as the monitor notes, but it was with the optimism of moving in the right direction. So I think that highlights why this change is even more surprising, if nothing else. But yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to say, and like you said, historically, I've gone back and listened to meetings. They were extremely long. So I think I was at one till 12 o'clock. A lot of times there was, Eric, there was controversy, there was other things going on, but I will say that our meetings are very professional. We've had no outbursts. We've had, you might have a member that says, okay, we could have done this better, or we could have done that better. So I just want to say that I think that this board has done a great job. I think that I'm not here for, as Member Rayner said, I'm not here for politicians. I'm not here about personality conflicts. I'm not here for personnel conflicts. I'm here because I represent the community. And at the last hearing, I don't know if it was the judge or somebody said, when the DOJ is gone, the board is the monitor. So we are who the citizens have, who the citizens will depend on. Well, we were. I just said it with the current one. So I just want to say that I'm here to represent the community. I'm here about constitutional policing. And I think that this board has done a exceptionally well job. As Member Nixon said, if we have to call something out, we do call it out. But it was not with ill intent, but it is only for correction, not I got you. I don't think there's any of us here that have that got you attitude. We're here. This is where we could use improvement. This is the suggestions that we're making to APD pertaining to those improvements. And here's what we saw that we didn't think, that we really didn't like. It may not have violated the SOP, but there are policy changes that we could recommend that said, it may not violate SOP currently, but there needs to be something added to the SOP. That we have also done that because, as you said, Member Nixon, it may not violate a SOP, but there's something wrong with what occurred. And an SOP or something needs to be written on that. And we have made those recommendations. And as you said, we don't know if APD will put them into place, but we certainly have made those recommendations. The other compliment that I would like to pay to this board is the chief. We had monthly meetings with the chief. We started monthly meetings with the chief that have been positive. Each month I've invited a different board member. Last month I didn't because it was such a short notice and it was right before Christmas and he didn't have much time. But the chief has also agreed to meet semi-annually with the board to answer questions from the board or from the citizens. And he said it's the first time he had ever been invited. That's why he hadn't come to our meeting. So I just want to say that we have done positive things. Even if we are abolished, I just want this board to know that I think that we've done great things for the citizens and for the community. And I hope, like I said, I hope that things will change. I would hope that the board, somebody would make a motion that we request that city council have the board have an active role in any amendments and that they stop the bill from being heard until we have those task force. The board has an active role in any amendments. And I'm not just saying the board and the agency should have an active role in any amendments. And that's what I would recommend, and that's what I would think that the board should make a decision on. But before I ask for that, I'm going to ask, are there any public comment? Is anybody from the public that would like to comment on anything that was said? And if you would, just unmute yourself and speak up because I can't see.
My name is Maureen Scourin. I think a lot of good points have already been made. One thing is, it looks like, from my limited knowledge, my understanding is y'all can only make recommendations at this time. I think you need more teeth regardless. And it looks like afterwards that'll be the same. So it looks like that's not changing. Your powers, it looks like, I read it very quickly, so I could be missing something. It's like, but you will have this contract compliance officer, which is at best a misnomer because there's no contract. And from my reading, it appears that this contract compliance officer is basically going to be your babysitter. So that's all I have. And like shrinking, what's the purpose of shrinking? I don't know. And nobody knows because the council is not talking to you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do think that it's important that council get our input. And that's just my thoughts on this. And I'm not saying the rest of you feel that way, but I just feel like, this should be done on the basis of our current work. And I will say we had amendment, we changed the ordinance. I believe it was last year, and here it is less than a year again, and we're again making changes to the ordinance. So I know prior, somebody had told me it's usually on a 3-year cycle that they look at this policy, this ordinance. I'm not saying they didn't ever change it. I think they were seeing on the average about every 3 years. It's what it's been in the past. But it's clearly left up to the board, like I said, on what we want to do. I do think that it's important that council hear us. I will say that I reached out to a couple of counselors because I found to talk to them. I had one counselor tell me no until after she's reviewed something or did something herself. I had another counselor agree to meet with me, but only me. And it's my, I always take someone with me because I don't want to speak for the board. I'm speaking for the board, but I don't want to say something that the board is not in agreement with. And I also take somebody with me because I always want the board to know that I'm not keeping anything from them. So anything said and done, there's another person, so the board knows that I'm being as transparent about any meetings, anything discussed with the counselors. So it wasn't to take somebody so we could gang up on one of the counselors or anything like that. That is just my habit. I always take somebody. Being a union president for over 5 years, I don't go into meetings most of the time by myself. So I'm going to stop with my speech there and just say thank you, board, for what you've done. And I would ask that somebody make a motion if you think that the board needs to have a seat at the table, and ask council to delay this until it can go to subcommittees or be vetted by all parties. And that means APD Forward, ACLU, all the parties, all the interested parties, and the community. And let's not leave out CPC. I think that they, also, as you were saying, the CPC had said, their representative had said they had made many recommendations to APD, and 90% of them, APD, what did you say, Member Raynor, that APD?
Yeah, they had rejected. He said he was given a roundabout number, but he thought close to 90%. And so, yeah, it's a very, this just seems out of the ordinary, and I'd like to understand why.
Yeah, go
sorry,
ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'll make a motion that we ask City Council to delay a vote on this and put this through the typical channels that bills are what bills typically go through, and not use this expedited process.
A second.
It may be inappropriate for me to ask this, but might this motion have greater weight if we pass it at the regular board meeting when more members are present on Thursday?
I agree with
Well-
that point, Mike.
Well, I really don't, because we only have one member, and he's already told me that he does not agree with this. So the only other member that would be absent from and I've stated that for the record, what Member Jackson said, would be Member Crawford. And I think time is of the essence, because
That's fine.
their agenda.
I'll withdraw what I said.
And I was just going to say, because their agenda goes out next Friday, because their meeting is the following Wednesday. Correct, Ms. Keefe? Okay, so that's why I'm saying time is of the essence. So the motion, and Member Rayner, I would ask that you amend that a little bit to say that they vet it properly, with the, Ms. Gooch, would you help us with the correct wording? We don't want to get it wrong, and we're all new at this, and we need your verbiage, help on the verbiage, correct verbiage for the motion.
Chair French and Member Rayner, I think that what you were both conveying is fine. I think the general idea is please send it to subcommittee and allow for more community input and involvement in your process. Whether it's through a study session, a working group, or a subcommittee, I don't think that channel matters. It's the fact that there is the channel and the opportunity for the community, the agency, the board, the amici groups to weigh in before final decision making occurs. So all in all, I wrote down that Member Rayner's motion was to ask City Council to delay a vote to put this through typical channels. I think that's fine. I think to put it into a subcommittee or vet it is also the same language. I think you'll get to the same spot through how Member Rayner worded it, or any other way that the chair or the board would like.
And I move all that.
Thank you. And I guess, Ms. Keefe, you would be the one relaying our motion to City Council. So did you understand what we're meaning? What the
I did
purpose of the
understand,
motion?
and I was actually just trying to look to see when the next Public Safety Committee hearing is. I believe that it would be in February. It's this month, so it was canceled. But actually, Ms. Gooch would be the one to relay your motion to council.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that. Okay, Ms. Gooch, so you will relay all that information for us?
Well, we need a vote first. I want to presuppose, but depending on what the vote is, yes, I can put together an email through council and through the director of City Council to be relayed.
Let me ask you this. I would prefer, and I don't know if this is out of line, you tell me, Ms. Gooch, I would prefer that you send it to Mr. Melendez and you also send it to every city council.
Chair French and members of the board, I have to include his legal counsel, which I believe is Ms. Keith. So I can send it to anyone that you all would like, but we do need to include legal counsel. Since I'm an attorney, I communicate through the other party's attorneys.
Well, oh, I'm sorry. I just thought, well, that goes without saying, Tina, I'm sorry. Ms. Keefe is here, so I just thought she'd be one of the CCs anyway. So let's vote on that. And then after that, after we vote on this, do we need another vote, or can we say, and it be sent, add that to the current motion that it be sent to council staff. I don't know what his correct title is, Mr. Melendez, and to all city council.
Mr. Melendez is Director of Council Services.
Okay, Mr. Melendez, of course. And then who else would we include, Ms. Key? There's another lady that also does work. Does she work under him? I'm not sure. I've heard another name brought up.
Do you mean Ms. Couladon? Of course, that's not her name anymore. It's Ms. Ronquillo.
What's her first name?
Julia.
That's it.
Okay. She is council. She's counsel for the city council. So I think Mr. Melendez is fine. And then as many counselors as you want, you could just send it to Council President Davis or to all 9.
Okay, I would prefer all of them. And okay, we have a motion.
Just quick, sorry. Should we also add our monitor and the DOJ on the CC?
Yes. And all the amici groups?
Well, I think we should CC it to God and country, to be honest with you. Look, I my intention on this whole thing is transparency. The downside of APD, and I can understand because the CASA was put in place due to their efforts and some of the things, unfortunate things that have happened in the public. It's easy to take this as a gotcha moment, like this board is here to look over your shoulder, and if you make one mistake, one hair out of place, boom, we're going to nail you. I have never taken that stance. If anything, I've taken one of no bias. In other words, balance and reciprocity, which in this country is practically unheard of. But it's an African consciousness that I've had and I've discovered through Sankofa with myself. So the intention is this. And the only reason I second the motion that Mr. Rayner made, Member Rayner made, is because come hell or high water, there's going to be transparency. As long as I'm serving on this board, we're going to be transparent. As long as I'm serving on the board, we're going to find out what the truth is and look for the truth. Guilty or not, good or bad, that's what the intention of being a board member is. Tell me what happened. Tell me what the facts are. Let's weigh in on that and let's make a good recommendation so the public can be safe. That's basically the intention of this board member anyway being here. So I'm not so much concerned with what city council is going to do, but what I will say is that we can do one of two things. We can feed into this get tough on crime type thing where we put our heads in the sand and we kind of go along to get along and do this thing, or we can take the stands as a board to be smarter on crime. And that includes holding accountable those entities that are there to quote unquote enforce the law. And that's what we're doing. So I think that we're going down the right path. And I think that letting everyone know is a good idea. But I also think that if anybody's concurring with what city council is trying to do, in my opinion, they're basically undermining the public. We represent the public. And if you undermine it, where the public has no representation in processes, which now removes a certain amount of transparency, then that public's trust of law enforcement in Albuquerque goes into the toilet. Whether APD, city council, or anybody else is going to agree with me, I don't want that to happen, because at the end of the day, again, I'm not going for constitutional policing anymore. The Constitution has been used in past 500 years or 276 years, however it's been, to do a lot of bad things. What we're really going for is community policing. It's not the police that keep the community safe. It's the community that keeps the community safe. Let law enforcement stay in their swim lane for enforce law, and then we do what we're doing here. So we're going to be on this board. We're going to do this, but this is going to continue. There may be conversations we have as long as we're here. And I think that some people really have to grow a little bit of a tougher skin, perhaps check their egos at the door and say, what can we do to keep the public safe? I just wanted to say that before we voted, because I think it's very important.
And I agree with you. This shouldn't be about personality conflicts. This shouldn't be about personnel conflicts. This shouldn't be about anything but keeping the community safe. And I will say, as a board, I think, and I appreciate you saying, Eric, because I haven't been here that long. Out of the 3 years, this is the best board, and we've made the. I don't want to misquote you. What was it you said about what we've done recently?
Oh, I think that we have a policy of transparency and honestly, in fact, and I that's what I've seen. I'm very impressed with not just the members of the board, but also with the agency as well, because they've grown with us, and we've seen it morph into something that's more solid. I think we're on the right track because we're getting pushback in the places where you should be getting pushback if you're doing the right thing. If people are with us, then we have a safer and more transparent community, which now has a more transparent and trustworthy board. And ultimately, the idea is to get APD to the point where they are trusted 100% in the community to do that. So,
not to drag this on, but I agree with exactly everything you're saying, and that's something that you said, which is the reason I joined this board, was to try and push this idea of community policing. If you don't have the trust of the public as a police force, you will never be able to do your job effectively. You, in fact, in my opinion, make your job more dangerous, more stressful, you're less trusted, which means a whole host of bad things. If you're really concerned, I saw one of the things that I saw as we've been talking since I've been on this board is the fight that the union representatives put up for us getting unredacted reports. And whether we got names or not was never really germane to me. It was the amount of energy being put forth to not meet us at the table says a lot. And then when I read in our policy and procedures, and I see that police officers are only required to have counseling sessions when something really bad's happened, or they only have the one or the two. I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 a year. It says to me, are you really trying to keep these officers safe? Because I'm sorry, I'm worried about the traffic cop who sees a kid get run over. That has an impact. And if we can make a change to the policy, why isn't there group therapy for these guys that's paid, where they can sit and talk about these things with other officers, where they don't have to go home and lie to their family about having a rough day because they don't know how to handle that. There's so much that we can do that would help these officers and help this community come together. And it seems to me, as like I said before, Albuquerque is number 2 for fatal police shootings and not getting any better. And now we're going to make changes. This board, this agreement's been in place for 7-8 years. And I was surprised when I joined the board at how little infrastructure there was. I would have assumed after 7-8 years that there would be a dashboard that says, as an example, the community could go to and say, these are the agency put out X number of discipline recommendations. These are the ones that were concurred. These are the ones, this is the percent where APD went above what we asked for. These are the percent where APD went below what we asked for. Something to show, again, for transparency, to show, hey, we've got nothing to hide. We are here, and if the community isn't liking what they're seeing, they don't have to be experts in policing. That's what the agency's for. They're the ones who should understand the policies, tooth and nail. But we are supposed to come in kind of independently and say, I don't want my officers doing this for X, Y, and Z, because this is my community. And I just feel I'm just so disheartened by that we were even having this conversation, that this has even come up for any type of changes that wasn't going to give the agency and the board a little bit more say at the table, because the agency also, I believe, is being kind of pushed to the side. I don't think that they are getting the support that they need. The building that they're in is not big enough, you know. They have to share offices. Like, there's a number of things that just says, you know, you put your, what's the quote? Your money says what your where you put your money is where your values are. And the city and the APD are not putting their money towards independent oversight and are not interested in working with us. I think on the level, if you were to talk to the chief, he's always been very open with us and worked with us. But I think at a system level, when you're talking about the functions and how things interact, we are sidelined 100%, both board and agency. And I had hoped that after 7-8 years, something would have changed. And it seems like nothing has changed. And now that there's a change being proposed, it's a step backwards, as far as I can tell, a step backwards. To find out that they're also getting rid of community outreach, I mean, blown away. I hadn't seen that part of it yet. So I will stop talking. We can take the vote, but I just have to say, I love this city. I love its citizens, but we are not doing right by them. And that is a tough pill to swallow. And without knowing the intent behind all of this, maybe it's just, you know, all we can do is speculate. And that is, again, transparency. That word just keeps popping back up into my head, and it's just not here. So I'll stop and we can take the vote, but I'm
glad you brought that up. I will say, when I went to NACO, there were several of the investigators there with us, Rashad. I think you were there also, remember, Rashad? And I just want to say that the investigators there at the agency, the ones that I met with and talked with, were there, I believe, for the right reasons, and were trying to do their best with the investigations. I know that there was some, there's always room for improvement. I'll leave it there. But the ones that I met with, I thought they were, there for the right reasons and want to do a good job. They really do. So, and I also want to say that we've made it easier. I won't say easier, but we've got it out there to the public that anyone can appeal their case. And we have had 3 appeals, and I think we're up for 2 more. And I think that's great that the citizens know that they can come to us if they don't agree with the outcome of the investigations. But I also believe that the investigators need to know that when we do these appeal, it is nothing personal. It's not a got you, but we need to look at it from all points of view. And as Eric said, if we see something, we're going to say, look at this, review this. But I do think that all the ones that I have met at the agency are there for the right reasons and want to have good investigation. So I don't want to leave the investigators and staff out of that either.
That's true. And I'll add on to that. If you look back, at least the time that I've been here, I think we go over every single case that has some type of consequence. We actually discuss those. And of the, 50, 60, I have no idea how many I've been on. I think maybe 1 or 2 we personally have said we disagree with. And so that in and of itself tells me the investigators, they've got it as far as I'm concerned. They understand the job, they're doing the job, they're hitting the mark. If it weren't for these appeals, and oftentimes, we've come back and said, we agree with the investigators. I don't think that the issue is between the board and the investigators. That's not where the issue is. The issue is, I think we, the board, and also the agency, are not getting the support that they need, the support structure, and the executive director. There needs to be a larger support staff that helps with some of these things. So as the board is turning over and new folks are coming on and other people are timing out, that we can usher those folks in and be able to keep going. And I just feel like if they if the agency had more of the support, and when I say support, like policy support, database support, if they had a better access than just read only to these to the policies and procedures, I think they could be even more effective. I think they're doing a good job, but it's, you know, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong though, on this, when an investigator puts forth their recommendation, I don't believe they ever get a response saying this was the final determination. We went with what you said or not. I think it goes into a file and it's done and they never get to hear back. And so again, I think that's doing the agency and the investigators a disservice if that's true. I believe that's true, that they never actually get to see the end. They have to go find it. But it would be nice to know, hey, am I hitting the mark with the APD? Are we seeing this the same? I would not want to do a job where I put my time and effort into something, creating something, and never hear back. And you know, there's just all these small indicators that just lets both the board and the agency know this is how much we think of you. And maybe as a board, we could have done more to push to get the agency the recognition and the support that they need, and their seat at the table a little bit larger, or their plate a little bit larger, so that they had a little bit more actual oversight. I don't know, but I do want to say I think the agency by and large is doing the job, and they are independent. And I just feel that just like the board, the agency needed to be treated with much more respect than what they are currently. And
I agree. And as I said, and as I told the monitor, and I told you, Rashad, when we were in NACO, my objective is that the agency and the board work parallel, and that this board and this agency be known as nationwide as one that's doing it right. And that's the board and the agency. And it has to be the both of us, not one. And we need to support each other. The board needs to support the agency, and the agency needs to support the board. And with that, let's go for a vote. Ms. Barella, will you take the roll?
Chair French,
Yes.
Member Luce,
Yes.
Member Nixon,
Yes.
Member Rayner,
yes.
Member Wortel.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the next agenda item. And it is, I'm sorry, case review material. Remember, Rashad, the reason I put this on here, it was on the agenda at the last meeting. And I know that you're not going to be present at the Thursday meeting, but it was just kind of like a follow-up of what you thought that we needed for to do the best reviews we can of those cases. So, and we didn't get to have it at the last meeting. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak on that.
Yeah, so some of the thoughts that I had were, we really need a better structure for and I know Member Nixon was working on this, but I feel like we are somewhat limited in our ability to, we get each case kind of piecemeal. And what I mean by that is, I believe that some of the cases involve the same officer on multiple occasions, but we don't ever get the ability to see that kind of thing. And so that was one of the things that I had thought about, was how do we get a more holistic view of the cases that we're reviewing to have a better understanding of what it is we're dealing with. Are we dealing with, it doesn't have to, there's got to be a way to get around, either work with the redaction or get around it, but to be able to see, is this something we're seeing? We get some of that in there where, they say prior within the X number, but links to those cases, so that we can really kind of see what's going on. That was one of the things that I really liked. I would have liked to have seen. In addition to that, what I believe the agency needs is a data analysis or analyst who can put together some of the trending so that we can see the types of which policies are being repeatedly violated against or being brought up and looked at. And maybe, because one of the things that Member Nixon brought up was a policy is being applied, but they didn't break policy. But if we keep seeing a policy that's being applied or being used, that's an indicator that maybe that one needs to be looked at. But in general, when I think of our job and what it is that we need to be doing, the analysis piece, the data analysis piece is lacking. The metadata that's associated with this, because there's a lot of really interesting information, time of day, intersection, or substation, what have you. There's a number of things that's there, but it's not being tracked. And so tracking this stuff and turning these cases into more of a big data, to use a term from a couple of years ago, where you have all this metadata that can be sorted and scraped and used to understand the problem from different angles. Right now, we just see each individual case, and that's so limiting that it's hard to abstract up and say, we keep seeing this kind of thing. All we have right now are our own personal notes. And I can tell you my notes I don't structure my notes in a way that I can look back and pull out the information, because you never know what it is that you might want to, what vector you want to take a look at the data from, right? Maybe it's Mondays, maybe Mondays are like the worst day. That'd be interesting to know, but we can't track that kind of thing. I'm throwing just out an idea, but an example. So ultimately, when it comes down to it, is the board/agency needs a full-time data analyst who has almost administrative access to APD's data set, and can work with their data analyst as part of as a team, so that we can get this information out in a readily available fashion. Because right now it's so difficult, and looking at these cases one by one is just not helpful for some of the charge, or excuse me, for the charge of trending and policy recommendation. And so if this board continues, that's something that we really need to push on getting, is a full-time policy analyst and a full-time data analyst that works for the agency and is building these data sets and attending these policy meetings and tracking some of these changes.
Thank you. I absolutely agree. And we definitely need that policy analyst. I think it's in the executive director's job description that the agency gives us trends. And I don't think I've ever got a trend since I've been here on this board from the agency. And that's because I don't think they have the staff. There's no policy analysts. So yeah, that's true. Member Nixon?
Yeah, I was gonna kind of dovetail into what Member Rayner was saying. It's interesting, because when we look at the agency, we look at the policy, we look at the cases, it's almost like you don't get a full picture. And that's not fair to everybody that's around. For example, trend analysis, which I'm big on trend analysis. Now, I just want to say that my limited analysis that I've had tells me that everything that Member Rayner said, as far as putting together the trends, putting together the dashboards, doing these kind of things, is artificially wrecked here. In other words, there's an artificial barrier to getting all this stuff. When I say artificial, I don't mean that there's somebody in a little room trying to keep us from getting the data. What I'm saying is, when you look at it systemically, you have a mode of thought, you have ideas, you have trends, you have processes in place that make it very difficult to get data that is very easy to get. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to report on. It's very easy to analyze. It's very easy to set trends. I'll give you an example. Since day one, the one thing that this board has done consistently, doesn't matter which agency or which agency members were there, this board has been extremely effective in looking at policies, making policy recommendations, and making those changes. That policy has been there. However, one of the main things, to Member Rayner's point, that we really fall down on, and I'm not just saying the agency, I'm saying APD altogether, is that when policy changes are made, when they're enacted, okay, put in place, the question then becomes, how do we know that that policy change has made a positive impact? What are we going to go on in order to make that happen? That is there. That data is there. We should be able to get it. A policy analyst should be able to get it. Remember, it's there, okay? Whether you're looking at disciplinary records, whether you're looking at violations, all these things can be put into a report, put into a dashboard. So what you're doing is you're getting a look at that trend, to Member Rayner's point. Again, I want to go back. That's artificially denied. That's artificially blocked. It doesn't have to be that way. So it's not a gotcha moment to APD. It's more of a moment of saying, look, you're looking at a lens from a citizen. This is how we're seeing what happens. If I have a complaint and I go through the difficulty of going and filing a complaint, then you send me a findings letter. And this findings letter says, well, this policy was not violated, but we do see that the misconduct did happen. And then when it did happen, that's all I get. So now I don't even know what happened to that officer. I don't even know if they acknowledged and said, you know what, you're right. We need to do things better. This is what we can do. So that I may have gone through an appeal, but I still don't get that sense of, look, I want to point out that there's a problem that I saw here. And what I'd like to have happen is, can you guys address this? How do we know it's been addressed? As agency, we need to, at the bare minimum, know that something has been addressed, whether it hasn't been addressed or not, but it needs to be there to say something is happening. In other words, we're moving in a direction. And we don't have that right now, Patty, because we can look at as many cases as we want, complaints, use of force, serious use of force. But when we don't know what the outcomes are, and we don't know what those disciplinary actions are, or to Member Rayner's point, we don't know if that's a repeat offender doing that and there's discipline there, then we are basically being kept in a box that is ineffective for everything that we're trying to do. So I agree with you 100%. And I just want to say, go on record, technically, I don't see any barriers to us getting unredacted or redacted information and data. We've been cleared to be on this board, so we should be able to see that and also have the confidence to say this is in confidence. Even if they have to have us sign an NDA, I'll sign an NDA. I don't have a problem with that. But we need to be able to do that to be more effective. And what I hope is that this board is moving towards that direction to make those recommendations and make those changes.
Yeah.
Well, I believe that Member Rayner had brought it up when we were talking about the which one? The cases that they don't agree with us. What's the word I'm trying to think of?
When they don't concur?
Non-concurrence.
Yeah.
Remember we had said, well, there's not a whole lot we could do with it, but you said there has to be a reason they're keeping it. They're reporting it. So let's look at some statistics. How many, why, that sort of thing. You guys I totally agree with everything you're saying, but like you said, we need staffing. They need staffing for that. And I totally agree.
We don't have the ability to do it ourselves. We can't do trend analysis when all we get are file folders. When we get file folders with just reports, and some of those file folders don't have all the reports in there. They don't have all of the items in there. And so it would be impossible and foolhardy at that to even try to do it with the tools that we have. I'd rather do no trending. If we're in the position that we're in now, it's better to not even try, because we will not get it right. It will be wrong, and it will point us in the incorrect direction. So until that happens, if the agency can't come up with, the candidates or whatever, APD needs to, work with us to get us access to their data folks. Something needs to happen until this person or people, whoever it is, whether it's one or many, are put into place. I don't know, how can you do trending when you don't even have access? And that's the thing. We don't have access. We don't have the ability to see what the final outcome is without having to go through some very labor-intensive process, as opposed to getting reports or access to the database itself, understanding the structures behind it. How are they structuring that data? If we can't see their map of the database, and I'll leave that to Member Nixon. I've looked at some of those, and that is not That's not my area, but I know that they have to have a data map. They have to have all of that somewhere. And if they don't have that map, that's another thing, because if it's not mapped and they don't understand it, you don't understand your own database, you don't know what it is you're collecting. But we're even further removed from that. And so we need help. We, the agency, we, the board, need help in order to get better at this. Otherwise, we are stuck doing what we're doing, which is we're in a reactive position, right? We can only rely on our memory and our notes on these one-offs as they come through. That's not a strong position to be in. And so, again, if the board goes forward, I would say that our number one priority is to make it known that the priority needs to be support staff for the agency and the board. This isn't to say that, Val and Katrina have been amazing and they're great with what they're doing. So when I say support staff, I'm not talking about what they're doing. I'm talking about, database administrators. I'm talking about policy analysts, whether they're lawyers or whatever, but folks who can do these very specific actions so that the agency themselves understand whether or not what they're recommending is going forward, and the board can understand how seriously APD is taking the recommendations from the agency and the board.
Member Wartell? Did you have your hand up?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw your hand up. I'm so sorry about that. I agree, Member Rayner, with everything you're saying, and that's part of our point. Our biggest job here, over 50%, is policy and procedure recommendations, and we can't do it unless we have the information and the data necessary to do that. So I totally agree. So with that, we'll move on to the last item. And that would be serious use of force and officer-involved shootings. The reason I put this on this agenda is because, as you know, we have quite a few. I know the FRB was meeting twice a week. I did get a list from Carlos, which is very, very lengthy, and I had scheduled these once a month to do these. But with the amendments being proposed in the ordinance, it takes a lot of time on our part. I know it takes a lot of time for me to review those and give you guys an overview, because you have to read all the investigations, try to look at every one of the videos to give you just an overview. So I need to know from the board if you want to continue these at this time. We do have one scheduled this month or not, because it does take a lot of our time. And you just want to add them back to the regular board meeting until we find out what's going to go on or not. Because like I said, we're having special board meetings just for those. It's left up to the board. Now, don't everybody speak at once.
I'm fine with splitting it up, but at the same time, do we continue on? What I'm struggling with myself personally is, do we continue on, or do we put ourselves in a holding pattern and wait to see what's going to happen? Because you're right, it takes a lot of time, and I don't want to miss my kids' basketball games or this or that for something that's all for naught. I am willing to miss the games. They're not very good. So I'm willing to miss those games. I'm willing to do those kinds of things, as long as it's going forward. But
I just want to stop you there and say, I know what school your kids go to, and how dare you say it's not very good?
The school is good. The basketball program, it's painful.
So it's left up to the board. Like I said, it takes a lot of time. As one person told me that was reviewing, she said, I have to do these one a day. I can't do them all at the same time because it's so much information, so it's left up to you. Like you said, I feel the same way. Do we move forward or do we just stay in a holding position until we find out exactly what's going to go on? But I'm
When you
leaving
say
it up.
holding position, what do you mean? What are we holding for?
Yeah, do you guys want to continue having the monthly meetings that are scheduled to go over these?
Oh, the serious use of force.
And officer involved, yes.
I got to be very honest with you. I look for ROI on anything I do, especially because I'm volunteering. So that means I'm working for free. And when I say work, I'm using my subject matter experts, just like every single person on this board brings an expertise to what we're doing. And I kind of feel like, yeah, we volunteered for it, but the city gets this for free. And so I don't mind pro bono. I don't mind doing this. Okay. Counselor Gooch, I used one of your attorney terms there. But the idea is that if we don't have the ROI on what we're doing, then I have to say, why are we even doing it? My ROI is, okay, we weigh in on a serious use of force or officer involved shooting. Then we see what the outcome is. We see what the discipline is. But if I don't know that somebody has learned something from that situation and made a point of saying, okay, how can we do this so the public's safer? Then I'm wasting my time. I'm not seeing that transparency yet.
What is ROI?
Return on investment.
You're speaking investment terms. Okay.
Yeah, I'm evaluating. I'm investing my time in it. So if I'm going to invest my time, then what am I going to get out of this investment? That's where, when I talk about public, it's very important to me, because if APD can show me that, look, every time we go out and every time we have one of these use of forces or we have one of these things, we're doing something better. We're tightening it up. We're making it so that it's transparent as to what we're doing, but we're learning. We're learning how to keep ourselves safer, but we're also learning how to keep the public safer. Then I'm okay with that, because we're moving in the right direction. We're all on the same page. But when we don't get to see that, then that's when it feels like this is a puppet board. And that's where, I'll leave it up to the rest of the board. If you guys want to do this, that's fine. We'll keep moving on it. But I would hate to think that there's serious uses of force, officer involved shootings out there, and no one from the public, with the exception of an IPRA request, can actually see or weigh in on that to figure out what's going on. So I think it's kind of the duty of the board to look at those as we need to.
It is the duty of the board, and I believe it's in the CASA. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it or we're not going to do it. My question is, do we want to continue having the monthly meetings since we're all in limbo if we're going to be abolished or not? That's all I was saying. Should we just add some, because we have to do them, should we just add them to our monthly meeting going forward instead of having those special meetings where we have another dedicated day to just looking at those cases?
Well, rather than exacerbate one meeting, I don't mind having more meetings. I don't mind scheduling more meetings for this.
Yeah, I prefer multiple meetings versus these marathon meetings. And I kind of think that these are special cases, and without anything other than, without anything solid saying that this board is being dissolved, I think I would prefer to just keep on keeping on, I think, and schedule them separate so that we can have the time to talk through them. I always preferred that, because I run out of gas after a while when we're just sitting for a while. So,
well, the CASA requires us to do this. So I was not in any means saying we're not going to do them. I just wanted to know if you guys wanted to continue having the special meetings, because I had scheduled one every month.
All right. That's my fault. Yeah, I misunderstood. But yes, I think I like the special meeting. I like splitting it up.
So do I.
Yeah.
So do I. Angela, what do you think?
I'm good with that. I think of doing it on Monday opposed to making those Thursday nights longer than they have been thus far. I'm in.
And Patty, I want to say thank you, Chairman French, for taking into consideration our lives and not having these ridiculous marathon meetings where we check out after 3 hours anyway. So thank you. for that and making an adjustment.
Yes, I just, I couldn't go 5 to 10, 5 to 12 anymore. I just couldn't do it.
No.
Mentally, I'm not there, and I don't think you guys were either. So that's why I tried cutting them down.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
no, I
then,
appreciate it.
yeah. And then, like I said, I was trying to cut the meetings down, so that's why I changed the agenda, but we will discuss more about that, going back to the other agenda on Thursday. So with that, let's move on to old business. And excuse me, Member Barella, we do have a special meeting scheduled this month, correct? For officer involved shootings and serious use of force?
Yes, Chair French, that meeting is scheduled for Thursday, January 19th, and those invites have already been sent out for the next 3 months. So all board members should have them on their calendars.
Okay, thank you. And I did try to give you guys as much, board members, as much advance notice as I could, so everybody could make sure they put them on their schedule, because it does take quite a bit of homework. And and if we continue as a board and we don't get abolished, we will be adding quite a few, because we absolutely need to catch up on those. I mean, we represent the citizens, and it's going to take a lot of work, and there's quite a few of them. You know, like I said, FRB has been meeting twice a week, and we're meeting once a month. So we need to catch up on those. So with that, we'll move on to the next item. Is there any old business? Any new business? Okay, well, our next meeting is this Thursday at 5 p.m. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Hope everyone had a great weekend. My little guy that you guys see sometime turned 1 this weekend.
All
So I had
right.
a great weekend on January the 6th. Not that that's a great day for us, but politically, but
Well, it's a great day now that he's turned 6. So we're on.
yeah, he turned 1. I'm sorry. He was born in 6, but he
One
turned
on
1.
the 6th.
Yeah, so you'll probably
care,
see him
folks.
again,
Yeah.
because he always likes to talk to the board when I'm on these meetings. So, okay, all
Thanks,
right,
folks.
we're
Take
adjourned.
care.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Yep. Bye.